I wasn't supposed to be home that early. A last-minute cancellation of my final client meeting gave me the rare chance to finish work before sunset, something that felt like an unexpected gift. As I stepped into our apartment, my shoulders relaxed at the thought of surprising Stephanie. I imagined her smile lighting up the room, perhaps already halfway through cooking one of her signature pasta dishes. But what greeted me instead was silence, a deep, unnatural silence that seemed to echo off the walls. Something was off. The air carried a scent I couldn't place. It wasn't her lavender candles or the citrusy perfume she always wore. No, this was different. Sharp, masculine, with undertones of cedarwood and musk. My gut tightened as the unfamiliar aroma settled in my mind, a strange presence in the space I had always called my sanctuary. I hesitated in the hallway, my hand gripping the edge of the doorframe. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Normally, Stephanie hated leaving doors open, she was meticulous about these little details. It felt like an invitation I wasn't sure I wanted to accept. Steeling myself, I pushed the door open. The room was pristine, the bed neatly made, the soft cream comforter tucked just the way she liked it. But there was a single crease on her pillow, faint yet undeniable. My eyes scanned the surface, catching something glinting faintly in the dim light, a gold bracelet on the nightstand. I picked it up, my fingers tracing its smooth surface. It wasn't hers. I knew her jewelry collection inside out, years of birthdays and anniversaries spent choosing pieces I thought would make her happy had taught me every curve and clasp of her treasures. This one didn't belong. The bracelet bore engraved initials, HG. I felt the heat rising in my chest, a slow burn that crept into my throat and tightened my breath. My mind raced through every possibility, grasping at benign explanations, but they all slipped away like smoke through my fingers. The small details were stacking up against me, against us. Just then, the faint sound of her key turning in the front door jolted me out of my thoughts. I stuffed the bracelet back onto the nightstand and quickly straightened, trying to look as though I had only just arrived myself. Stephanie walked in, her heels clicking softly against the floor as she made her way to the bedroom. "Jake," she called out, her tone carrying that effortless sweetness that used to feel like home. "I'm here," I replied, forcing my voice to stay steady. When she stepped into the room, she looked surprised but delighted to see me. Her cheeks flushed slightly, though whether from the cold outside or something else, I couldn't say. "You're home early," she exclaimed, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Her scent was familiar, comforting, but it only clashed more violently with the lingering masculine cologne. "Yeah," I said, managing a weak smile. "Meeting got cancelled." As she busied herself with removing her coat and chatting about her day, I found myself studying her closely. Her movements were natural, but there was something faintly hurried about her words, as though she were filling the space between us with noise. I tried to join the conversation, but my mind kept circling back to the scent, the bracelet, and the creased pillow. I wanted to ask her, to demand an explanation right there and then. But a voice inside me whispered caution. If I jumped to conclusions without proof, it could destroy everything. So, I decided to wait. To watch. To listen. For the first time in our marriage, I felt the uneasy weight of doubt settle over me, a shadow I knew wouldn't lift easily. The unease from that night didn't fade, it lingered like a phantom in the corners of my mind. Every detail of our apartment seemed to mock me with questions I couldn't answer. The scent of his cologne was gone by morning, but its memory clung to me, pulling at threads of doubt I couldn't ignore. I told myself I was imagining things. That the bracelet, the crease on the pillow, the hurried way Stephanie spoke when I came home, none of it added up to anything concrete. But my gut said otherwise, and it was relentless. A few days later, I found myself in the office early, unable to focus on my case files. My thoughts were consumed by images of her with someone else. I needed proof, one way or another. The not knowing was worse than anything I could imagine. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I started to investigate my own life. It began subtly. I asked casual questions, phrased innocently, like I was genuinely curious. "Hey, how was work today? She answered too quickly. Busy, same as always. Nothing special. I tried to keep my voice even. Any new clients or projects keeping you late? Her eyes flickered for the briefest moment before she smiled. No, just the usual. The usual. A phrase so bland, yet it felt like a wall she'd built to keep me out. At night, when she was asleep, I opened her laptop. My hands trembled as I typed in the password she'd once shared with me, years ago, without hesitation. It still worked. Her inbox was mostly work-related, filled with emails from clients and colleagues. But then I saw it, a message thread from someone named HG, the same initials engraved on the bracelet. The emails weren't romantic, not overtly, but there was a familiarity to their tone that felt out of place. Can't wait to see you, one read. Another mentioned meeting at the usual spot at 7 p.m. My heart raced as I scrolled through the thread, each line tightening the knot in my stomach. I closed the laptop quietly, my mind reeling. Was it innocent? A friend or colleague? Or was it something more? I couldn't rely on half-truths or assumptions. I needed to see for myself. The next evening, I told Stephanie I'd be working late on a case, knowing she wouldn't question it. Instead, I parked my car a block away from her office and waited. The minutes crawled by until, finally, she emerged from the building. My heart pounded as I watched her glance at her phone, then hail a cab. I followed at a safe distance, keeping my headlights low, my hands gripping the wheel. The cab stopped at a dimly lit bar on the other side of town. A place I'd never been to, one she'd never mentioned. She stepped out, her pace quick, purposeful. I parked and waited, watching her disappear through the door. My breath came in shallow gasps as I debated my next move. Finally, I gathered my courage and followed her inside. The bar was small, crowded, the air thick with smoke and muted conversations. I scanned the room, and then I saw her. She was sitting at a corner booth, leaning in close to a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, well-dressed, with an air of confidence that made my stomach turn. His hand rested casually on hers, their heads bowed together as if sharing a secret. I froze, my feet glued to the floor. The sight of them laughing, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years, felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language said enough. This wasn't just a friend or a colleague. This was something more. Something I wasn't a part of. I stumbled out of the bar, my head spinning. The cold night air stung my face, but it did nothing to dull the pain spreading through me. The truth was no longer a vague suspicion or a series of clues, it was undeniable, and it shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, replaying the scene over and over in my mind. Every detail was a betrayal, every laugh a reminder of what I'd lost. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, to rage against the injustice of it all. But I knew I couldn't. Not yet. I needed a plan. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Stephanie leaning into him, laughing, her hand on his, flashed in my mind like a cruel, unrelenting slideshow. My chest ached with a mix of anger and heartbreak, emotions that churned together into something unrecognizable and overwhelming. By morning, I was a shadow of myself. I avoided Stephanie's gaze as she moved through the kitchen, humming to herself, her obliviousness cutting deeper than any accusation could. How could she act so normal? How could she smile, knowing what she'd done? "Are you okay, Jake?" she asked, tilting her head slightly, concern softening her features. Her voice, once the sound that brought me comfort, now felt like an insult. I forced myself to nod. "Just tired. Work's been a lot." She smiled sympathetically, brushing a hand along my arm. "You've been working so hard. Maybe we should take a weekend away, just the two of us." Her words landed like a slap. A weekend away? With her? After what I'd seen? I excused myself quickly, retreating to the sanctuary of my office. Once the door was closed, I leaned against it, gripping the edge of my desk for support. The room spun, and I struggled to breathe through the suffocating weight of her betrayal. My mind flickered back to the beginning. I remembered the first time I saw her, standing under the golden glow of the string lights at a friend's party. She was radiant, her laughter filling the room and drawing people to her like moths to a flame. When she spoke to me, I'd felt like the only man in the world. We'd talked for hours, sharing dreams, fears, and stories that felt like secrets only we were meant to know. And now, all of that felt like a lie. Every memory was tainted. Every kiss, every whispered "I love you," every plan for the future, it all felt meaningless. I thought of the nights I'd stayed late at work, believing I was building something for us. The sacrifices I'd made, the trust I'd given her without question. Had any of it mattered? Or had she been looking for a way out all along? By the afternoon, my anger had grown. It burned hotter and brighter, threatening to consume me entirely. I couldn't sit still. The walls of the house felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with her presence. Her perfume lingered in the air, her voice carried faintly from the other room, and it all felt like an unbearable mockery. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, needing to escape. The road stretched out before me, empty and endless, but it wasn't enough to clear my head. I stopped at a park we used to visit together, where we'd once laughed over cheap wine and dreamed about growing old side by side. I sat on a bench, my head in my hands, the ghost of her laughter haunting me. I replayed the moment in the bar over and over, dissecting every gesture, every look. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional. The connection they shared was undeniable, and it made me sick. What had he given her that I hadn't? What had I done wrong? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about her. It was about me. She had betrayed me, yes, but I had allowed it. I had been blind to the signs, too willing to believe in the picture-perfect marriage I had built in my head. I had ignored the cracks, dismissing them as temporary, when in reality, they had been growing deeper for years. When I returned home that evening, I felt different, more focused, more resolute. Stephanie greeted me with a warm smile, as if nothing had changed. "Hey," she said, her voice soft and inviting. "I made lasagna. Your favorite." I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the one I'd seen at the bar. How could she lie so effortlessly? How could she look me in the eye and pretend? "Thanks," I said, forcing a tight smile. "I'll eat later." As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, my mind was already working, piecing together the steps I needed to take next. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. She needed to believe she'd gotten away with it. But inside, I was already planning my next move. I wasn't going to let her betrayal define me. And I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I spent the next few days keeping up appearances, wearing the mask of a devoted husband while plotting my response to Stephanie's betrayal. If her actions had been a silent dagger, I was preparing a sharp, deliberate counter. The first step was clarity. I hired a private investigator to dig into Henry Graham, the man who had shattered my marriage. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. He was married, with 2 children, a polished reputation in corporate circles, and, ironically, a public stance on family values. The hypocrisy only fueled my determination. As I gathered evidence, I decided how to deliver my message. I didn't want a messy confrontation or a chaotic argument. Stephanie had made her choices in secret. I would expose them in public. I invited close friends and a few colleagues to a dinner party. It was the perfect cover, a celebration of my latest professional milestone. Stephanie, thrilled to play the role of supportive wife, threw herself into the preparations, oblivious to my plans. On the surface, I was calm, collected, even affectionate. Inside, I was counting down to the moment I'd reveal the truth. The evening arrived, and the house buzzed with chatter and laughter. Stephanie shone, her charm on full display as she mingled with the guests. Watching her play the part of a devoted spouse filled me with equal parts disgust and resolve. "Jake, a toast," someone called out, and the room quieted as I stood. I raised my glass, my voice steady. "To trust," I said, letting the word hang in the air. Stephanie's smile wavered for just a second. It's the foundation of every meaningful relationship. And when it's broken, well, everything crumbles. I set my glass down and reached for the folder I'd placed on the table earlier. Stephanie's eyes darted to it, confusion and unease flickering across her face. "This," I said, holding up a photo of her and Henry at the bar, "is what trust looks like when it's shattered." The room erupted in gasps as I laid out the evidence: photos, emails, receipts. Each piece painted a vivid picture of Stephanie's betrayal, a story she could no longer deny. Stephanie's face drained of color. "Jake," she stammered, "I can explain." I cut her off, my voice cold. "Explain? Explain how you thought I wouldn't find out? Or how you could look me in the eye every day and lie? Save it, Stephanie." I turned to the guests, some of whom sat in stunned silence while others exchanged horrified glances. "I invited you all here tonight because I thought you deserved to know the truth. Stephanie has been seeing this man, Henry Graham, a married man with 2 children. The room grew quieter as I continued. "And Henry, if you're wondering how your wife is going to feel about this, don't worry. She'll have these photos by morning." Stephanie's expression shifted from shock to desperation. "Jake, please," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. But I had nothing left to give her. The aftermath was swift and decisive. I filed for divorce the next morning, ensuring that Stephanie would walk away with nothing more than the clothes on her back. Henry's life unraveled just as quickly. His wife, armed with the evidence I'd sent her, filed for separation, and his spotless corporate image crumbled under the weight of scandal. For weeks, Stephanie tried to reach me, leaving voicemails that swung between apologies and accusations. I never answered. The house we'd shared was sold, and I moved into a new apartment, leaving behind the shadows of our broken marriage. One evening, months later, I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The pain of betrayal had dulled, replaced by a quiet strength. I realized then that Stephanie's infidelity hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. It had forced me to confront not only her lies but also the parts of myself I'd ignored. The scars were still there, but they were a reminder of what I'd survived. And as the city hummed below me, I smiled to myself. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. Subscribe to never miss a new story and discover even more captivating tales.